Are you ready to hear a story that will give you goosebumps? If you are, hit that like button to boost your courage, share to warn your friends, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any chilling tales from us. Now then, let the story begin. Several months ago, I made the decision to completely blow up my life. Impulsive, yes. Not well thought out either. If you were to ask me why I did it, I'm not sure I would have been able to offer a cogent explanation. I guess I was just feeling trapped, starting to get tired of it all. It was a Monday morning. I was on the metro going to work as usual, but when my stop came, I didn't get up. I remained sitting until the end of the line, arriving in some industrial part of the city I'd never been to. I stood up and walked off the train and onto the platform, breathing in the cool air. I checked the time on my phone, 8:10 a.m. A few minutes later, I got a text from my boss. "Where are you?" A message that would have usually sent me into a panic. But at that moment, I just felt too detached from everything to care. A strange kind of feeling. I guess something in me just snapped. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Going to work and then coming home and studying in the hopes of advancing in a career I couldn't have cared less about. I've been working forever, going to school forever. Always told myself that someday I wouldn't have to anymore. But I'd stopped feeling so sure about that. I made my way out of the station. With the morning rush settled, it was mostly empty. I chose a street at random and began walking until I found a bar. After a few drinks, I was smiling. Not just because of the alcohol, but because it felt like I'd regained some semblance of control. Later that day, I bought a paper map from a dollar store. Went home and pinned it to my wall, then closed my eyes and threw a dart at it. First time it landed in the Pacific Ocean. Second time somewhere in Malaysia. Never been to the country, and so I booked the first flight available and flew out a few days later. I spent a week there. Didn't have an itinerary or a schedule the entire time. Just kind went wherever the wind would take me. I wandered around, went bar hopping, tried new foods, made new friends. Slowly, I could feel my world begin to open up. When I got back to my apartment, I threw another dart. 2 days later, I was on a flight to Sao Paulo, then Montreal. One day I got home and found out I'd been evicted. Wasn't really surprised, and it didn't really matter. I just booked another flight. I looked over my finances and determined that I had enough savings that I'd been planning on using as a down payment someday to keep this going for about another 5 months. Then a risky night in Macau gave me enough for another 3. Of course, I was still wary about what I'd have to deal with when it all ran out. I'd told my family I was just going on vacation, but somehow they'd found out I'd stopped showing up to work. I'd been avoiding picking up their calls, but eventually did so, just so they wouldn't try and file a missing persons report or anything. I explained to them what I'd been doing, and it was like a switch had flipped. Any hint of concern in their voices suddenly melted away, replaced by this tone of annoyance, borderline rage. They told me that I was going to regret this, that I was ruining my life, that if I came to my senses and returned home right now, maybe they could help me pick up the pieces. I just hung up. I considered getting odd jobs in various places, which I did for a while. But then I just stopped caring. I should have been careful, fearful for the future ahead, but I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I was free, completely uninhibited. I just wanted to keep riding the wave. Soon, I had visited 22 different countries. I'd made more friends, experienced more in those months than I had in my previous 29 years of life. I didn't want to stop, and I wasn't going to. The Netherlands was my 23rd. One night, I left a house party in Rotterdam with a girl in a blue dress. My mind was hazy, under the influence of a cocktail of different substances. I followed her into dense woods where she supposedly lived. In retrospect, the alarm bells should have been going off. In the moment, I just didn't care. The trees and brush seemed to grow thicker, more hostile the further we went. We walked for a long while, but every time a concern would start to creep into my head, she'd pass me the bottle, give me a look seductive enough to nullify my fears. Even in the darkness, her cold blue eyes seemed to glisten. Eventually, we arrived at a house in a clearing. I remember entering the place, but not much more afterwards. I woke up the next morning in an empty bedroom. Everything was bathed in a gray, muted light. There was a loud, steady drumming against the windows and the roof. Rainfall. No idea where the hell I was, but the hangover was nasty enough that I didn't immediately question it. I looked around the room. Pretty bare bones. Other than the bed, there was a small dresser, a mirror, 2 paintings on separate walls. The closet was open, revealing nothing inside. The air smelled stale. I could feel traces of dust in my throat and nostrils. I stumbled into the bathroom and threw up for a bit. Then I washed my face with cold water, drinking some of it straight from the faucet. Then I laid back down, listening to the rain as I tried to piece together what happened the night prior. Memories of the party came back to me in fragments. The music festival I'd been at before that. The breakfast at the hostel. The girl. The woods. I began looking around for my phone and wallet, relieved to find them on the floor beside the bed, with no cash or cards missing. After my headache had dulled into something manageable, I got out of bed, left the room. The hallway was just as empty, silent. Still no sign of anybody. I called out and got nothing back but a strange echo, as if this place was much bigger than what I could see. I checked the other rooms upstairs, nothing still. Then I went downstairs, and it was the same story. I sat down on the couch and checked my phone to see if I'd taken down a number, somebody I could call, but it didn't seem that way. The last message I received was from some dude I'd met at the festival earlier. Nothing that could have been from the girl in the blue dress. I found it strange just how much faith she must have had in me to leave me in her place alone like this. But I guess it was mostly empty anyways. Not much to steal. And then, that cautious part of my brain lit up. What if this wasn't actually her place? What if I'd just been led into a really bad situation? I stood up and raced to the front door, taking a deep sigh of relief when I realized I could open it. The front porch was decorated with a few potted plants and 2 old rocking chairs, white paint peeling off of them. The air outside had a pleasant sweetness to it, something almost calming to breathe in. But the rain was a different story. It was chaotic, oppressive even, pouring harder than I'd ever seen it pouring anywhere before, the ceaseless deluge of droplets smacking the ground, producing a near-deafening wall of noise. I'd never heard about a hurricane hitting the Netherlands, and this didn't seem to be one, because there was no wind. The rain was coming down in a completely straight line. No thunder or lightning either. It was difficult to make out any of the surroundings, though I could still tell I was surrounded by woods. I squinted ahead, eventually spotting the clearing we'd come through. But the idea of venturing out and trying to find my way through the forest in conditions like this sounded god-awful. I decided to go back inside, wait it out. It wouldn't have been so bad if I could just scroll through Instagram or something, but my phone battery was sitting at around only 25%, and I hadn't been able to find a charger. I didn't want to be stuck out here with a dead phone, so I decided to explore the house instead. There really wasn't much to note. If I had to guess when it was built, I'd say maybe 20 years ago. Nothing close to modern, but not exactly ancient feeling either. It actually reminded me of my childhood home in the suburbs. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Sounds like a lot of space, but the layout was pretty tight, not a lot of space between. Making up the downstairs area was a living room, a kitchen, a small laundry room, and then one more room behind a locked wooden door. Could have led down to a basement. Or maybe it was just a closet. Not that I really cared. I just wanted the rain to stop. I didn't know how it was possible, but it only seemed to be ramping up. I checked the weather app, but it claimed that Rotterdam was only partly cloudy, with a 5% chance of precipitation. Nothing about extremely heavy rainfall in the news either. I shook my head, feeling the confusion and frustration beginning to proliferate. This was insane. I went back upstairs, looking through every closet in the hopes of finding a rain jacket, an umbrella, something that could give me a fighting chance. But there was jack shit. I checked the time, 2 past noon. Fuck it, I thought. I'll just try and brave it, see how far I can get. I did find something at least a little bit useful in the kitchen, a full, unopened box of garbage bags. I turned one into a makeshift jacket using a knife I found in the drawer to cut out head and armholes. Then I fashioned another one into a hood. I used a third to wrap tightly around my phone to minimize any water damage. Then I ventured out, and I didn't get far. The second there was no longer a roof covering my head, it felt like I was drowning. The bags really didn't do much to help. Every second I was forced to wipe water from my eyes, making it nearly impossible to tell where the hell I was going. The forest floor had turned into a muddy swamp, my shoes pulling up heavy clumps of wet earth after every step. I was cold, uncomfortable, slowly losing my shit. But I was still determined to press forward. That was until I saw the people standing at the edge of the clearing. I had to do a double take. I really hadn't noticed them at first. Almost as if they just suddenly appeared. Should have been good news, right? There were people around. Maybe one of them could help me out. But the details didn't support that conclusion. There were a staggering amount of them, what appeared to be dozens, all just standing there, perfectly still. They could have been mannequins. I stood in place waiting for one of them to say something, waiting for any kind of reaction at all. I tried making out their faces, what they were wearing, though the rain made it difficult. The only thing I was reasonably sure about was that their frames were tall and slender, and that their skin was strangely pale, devoid of any color at all. Then I started wondering why I was able to notice this. Why I was able to see a perfect outline of their bodies. They were naked, I realized. All of them, from head to toe. I turned, began scrambling back towards the house. That's when I saw more. They were scattered along every inch of the clearing, all pale, naked, just standing stationary between the trees. The house was completely surrounded by them. I slipped and fell about 4 times before I finally made it back inside. My entire body was soaked, my legs, arms, and back slick with mud. I was shaking my head, really not wanting to accept whatever the fuck was happening. This was a dream, I tried to convince myself. A really fucked up, vivid dream. Wake up then. Motherfucker, wake up. I waited for a long time before accepting that I wouldn't. I looked through a window. The pale figures were still there. It didn't look like they'd moved at all. I pulled out my phone. According to the weather app, it was now mostly sunny, 0% precipitation. This was all too much. I was panicking and decided it was worth dialing 112, the emergency line in the EU. The signal wasn't great, but I still managed to get through. I tried explaining to the operator what was happening in a way that made me seem the least insane. I'm in a house in the woods. Heavy rain outside. Strange, potentially malicious people surrounding me. After I'd finished speaking, there came a long silence on the other end. I sound like a lunatic, I thought to myself. She thinks I'm crazy. I looked through the window again. The figures were still there. But maybe it was a good thing if she thought I was crazy. You need to send somebody over, I said. I don't know the address. I don't know where I am. Send somebody over. Send somebody now. I paused. I really need to get the fuck out of here. Eventually, I heard her sigh. I'm sorry. I can't do that, she said. Her voice sounded shaky, as if she were on the verge of tears. Why? I asked her. Can't you trace the call or something? Anything? I'm sorry, she repeated. We won't be able to find you. I asked her what she meant. It's happened before. We searched the woods for weeks, for the house that you're in, but we were never able to find it. I stammered for a bit, suddenly unable to find any words. Listen to me, she continued. I believe you, everything you've said. The first time I got a call about it, I didn't. But it's happened enough now that I know something's going on. But stay calm. Don't panic. Just listen carefully. My head was starting to spin. I didn't know how to react to that, but I obliged. I told her that I'd listen, because what the fuck else could I do? You're not doomed, she told me. Eventually the rain will stop. It might not seem possible right now, but you need to be patient. Don't lose your head. Do not panic. You need to be as lucid as possible, because when the rain does stop, you need to run like hell. You'll have to run for a long time. But don't stop. You might hear something chasing after you. Don't stop until you're out of the forest, completely free from the woods. They won't follow you any further. What about the people outside? Or whatever the hell they are? She sighed. I don't know, she said. This is the first time hearing about them. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you there. I took a deep breath. Okay, that's fine, I said. But could you stay on the line with me? Absolutely, she said. I'll be here. Also, one more thing you need to know. About the basement. Don't... She stopped mid-sentence and I looked at my phone. An empty battery sign lingered on the screen for just a moment before it went black. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I just sat there. If you've never experienced sheer dread before, it's a weird kind of feeling. It nearly takes you out of your own body. But then I remembered what she'd told me. That eventually this would end. That I still had a chance. Once again, I looked through the window. The figures were all still there, though they appeared to have moved closer. Or maybe not. I didn't want to think about it, and so I backed away. Be patient, I told myself. Just wait it out. I went back upstairs and got into one of the showers. If I had to wait, then I may as well be comfortable while I did so. The warm water felt nice, even more so as it was able to wash away the mud that had begun drying on my skin. I saw a bottle of shampoo and reached for it, but I hesitated before squeezing any out. It didn't feel right. It felt heavy, as if there was something solid inside of it. I unscrewed the lid and immediately the shower filled up with a deep scent of formaldehyde and rot. I looked inside. The bottle was full of eyeballs. Looks like they had been scooped straight from their sockets. Some of them were blinking. I put it down and turned off the water and left the shower. I rinsed some of the mud off of my clothes in the sink and then squeezed as much water out of the fabric as I could before putting them back on. It certainly wasn't comfortable, But with everything else going on, it wasn't really a big deal. I didn't know what else to do, so I went back downstairs. It was starting to get dark out, something that just put me more on edge. But I tried to focus on something else, like the fact that I was starving. I went into the kitchen and opened up the fridge. There was nothing in there but a small container filled with some dark, sludgy-looking substance. I didn't open it up. Instead, I tried rifling through the cabinets, eventually finding one that was stocked, with Emery's U.S. Army rations dated 1968, about a dozen of them. I didn't know what to make of it, so I just began opening them up, collecting the contents that I thought could have been edible. In the end, it just amounted a bunch of crackers and hard candies, along with one pack of instant coffee that hadn't yet solidified, which was a fine enough meal given the circumstances. I was checking the window every few minutes, and every time the figures seemed to be getting closer. It was hard not to stress about it, but they at least appeared to be moving at a snail's pace. It'd be a long while before they reached the house. I paid close attention to the rain as well. At times I'd sit on the couch for hours and just listen to it, but it never slowed down. It only poured harder. As the last daylight drained from the sky, the house was practically underwater. I could see nothing anymore. Water began leaking in from the door and from the ceiling in one of the bedrooms. I tried watching the television in the living room but could only access one channel. It looked like handheld footage of an attic, the sole source of light being a candle on the floor. Somebody was sitting in front of it, their back turned to the camera. I could tell from the outline of their naked body that they were frail, skin clinging loosely to bone. After a while, they began pounding their fists on the floor, and I thought I could hear noise coming from somewhere upstairs. I turned off the television and everything went silent. I didn't turn it back on. Soon, I could hear a scratching noise, like fingernails on wood. I traced the source of it to the other side of the wooden door, the basement. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Water began leaking in from the bottom. It was murky, as if it were mixed with dirt or blood or both. It smelled horrendous. I just sat back down on the couch. After a while, I got the sense that I was being watched. Through the windows, I could see nothing but my own reflection. Then I turned the lights off, and after my eyes had adjusted to the dark, I could make out the outline of somebody looking in. It almost looked like their face was pressed up to the glass. I tried turning the lights back on, but they were no longer working. It was so dark that I could barely see my own hand in my front of my face. But maybe it was for the best, because then they wouldn't be able to see me. That awful smell from the water leaking in from the basement began to intensify, like sulfur mixed with metal, with a hint of a rot. I could also smell something burning. A strange heat filled the room. Soon I could hear the windows creaking, strain on the glass, as if something were putting gradual, heavy pressure on it from outside. It no longer felt safe in the living room, and so I stood up, intending on going back upstairs. Then I realized I could no longer see anything at all. It was quite literally pitch black. I couldn't even tell where the windows were, which didn't make any sense, because shouldn't there have been at least a little moonlight? I began using my hands to feel around, to guide my way towards the stairs. Eventually, I found the railing. As I was making my way up the steps, I nearly tripped over something. It was a person sitting on the steps. Their skin was cold and clammy, then they began to cry. The crying soon turned into sobbing, which turned into wailing. I ran up the rest of the stairs, and I heard it chasing after me. It sounded like they crawling on all fours. I felt along the wall until I found one of the bedrooms, and then rushed in and shut the door behind me. Whatever was on the other side began slamming it, each impact rattling the frame. The wailing then turned into a horrific, inhuman shriek. I was still clutching the knife, though it didn't provide much comfort. My heart was beating faster than it ever had, faster than I thought possible. Each slam was more furious than the last, and soon I could hear the wood beginning to splinter. The shriek filled the room, and it was loud enough to make my head hurt. I scrambled through the darkness until I found the bathroom, shutting myself inside it right as I could hear the bedroom door being ripped off its hinges. I listened as it stalked its way around the room. Sounded like a dead body being dragged in circles across the carpet. I tried to stay as silent as possible, thinking that maybe it didn't know I was in here. But then it stopped moving, and then it knocked on the door. "Police, open up," it said. The voice sounded human enough. I was nearly tempted to listen. "Open up, police!" But I stayed still. "If you don't open the door, I'm gonna come in there and rip your stomach out." A few more of these threats, and then it changed tactics. "Look what you've done," it said, now in my dad's voice. "Fucked everything up. You could have had a good life. What have you done?" I shook my head. "Fuck you," I muttered under my breath. "What was that?" it responded. It actually sounded exactly like him. Get your ass out here right now, right fucking now! I'd done a good job of staying composed up until this point, but it was all starting to become too much. You can only experience so much terror before it starts to overload your senses. I guess for some, it ends up paralyzing them. But something else happened to me. The fear turned into disbelief, which then turned into rage. Because what was the point of all this? Was it just to scare me? For what? Why me? What the hell had I done wrong? I started asking these things aloud. Then I walked up to the door, pressed my head against the wood. What the fuck is this? I screamed, letting out all my frustrations out at once. What do you fucking want? They went silent. The knocking stopped as well, but they didn't leave. I could still hear their raggedy breaths on the other side. I continued to scream. If you want to open up the door, go ahead and fucking do it. Do it and go fuck yourself. Do it and 10 go to hell. I don't care. I don't care anymore! Get this fucking bullshit over with! Soon my throat was raw, spit flying all over my lips and chin. I was clenching my jaw hard enough for it to hurt. So you're just gonna fucking stand there? Do something. What's the fucking point of this? What's the fucking point? Do something or fuck off and let me leave. After this, my memories became scattered. I remember continuing to scream even as my voice turned hoarse. I remember the rage I felt even though I couldn't recall exactly what was said. I remember threatening voices coming from the drain in the sink, water splashing inside the toilet, the shower turning off and on, a burning smell filling up the room. They were really trying, doing everything they could, but I think it just pissed me off even more. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the room was bright. I sat up, seeing sunlight streaming in from the window, and then the pain hit me. My knuckles were bruised, pieces of glass sticking out of them. There was glass, blood, and water all over the floor. The mirror had been shattered, as had the shower door. Holes in the walls. I stood up and looked through the window. No more rain, just a cloudless blue sky. I walked over to the door and opened it cautiously, half expecting to find some monstrosity waiting for me on the other side, but there was nothing. I left the bedroom and went down the stairs and into the living room. The door to the basement was open, and it was flooded completely by that dark, foul water. I made sure to avoid stepping on any of it as I made my way to the front door. I opened it up, stepped out into the warm light. Then I started running. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, but I never stopped. Not until I had reached a road. My legs were long past their limits at this point, and I just about collapsed the moment my shoes touched the asphalt. I never did hear anything following me, but when I looked back into the forest, I could see somebody standing at the tree line. A young woman in a blue dress. She would have been the most beautiful person I'd ever seen had her perfect features not been contorted into visceral, burning hatred. She continued to scowl at me, and I stared back at her. Eventually, a car came by and I waved them down. 2 large men. They were wary at first and asked to pat me down before they'd let me in. When they found nothing, they offered to drive me back into town. As we drove away, I looked back at the woods one last time, and the woman was no longer there.